The Beale ciphers, also referred to as the Beale Papers, are a set of 3 ciphertexts that supposedly reveal the location of one of the grandest buried treasures in U.S. history: thousands of pounds of gold, silver and jewels estimated to be worth over $63 million as of September 2011. Comprising 3 ciphertexts, the first text describes the location, as yet unsolved, the second ciphertext the content of the treasure, solved, and the third lists the names of the treasure's owners, unsolved, and their next of kin. The treasure was originally obtained by a mysterious man named Thomas Jefferson Beale in 1818 while prospecting in Colorado. Of the 3 ciphertexts, only the second one has been cracked. Interestingly, the U.S. Declaration of Independence turned out to be the key, a curious fact given that Beale shares his name with the author of the Declaration of Independence. The cracked text does reveal the county where the treasure was buried, Bedford County, Virginia, but its exact location is likely encrypted in one of the other uncracked ciphers. To this day, treasure hunters scour the Bedford County hillsides digging, often illegally, for the loot. The story of the 3 ciphertexts originates from an 1885 pamphlet detailing treasure being buried by a man named Thomas J. Beale in a secret location in Bedford County, Virginia, in the 1820s. Beale entrusted a box containing the encrypted messages to a local innkeeper named Robert Morris and then disappeared, never to be seen again. According to the story, the innkeeper opened the box 23 years later, and then decades after that gave the 3 encrypted ciphertexts to a friend before he died. The friend then spent the next 20 years of his life trying to decode the messages, and was able to solve only one of them, which gave details of the treasure buried and the general location of the treasure. The unnamed friend then published all 3 ciphertexts in a pamphlet which was advertised for sale in the 1880s. Since the publication of the pamphlet, a number of attempts have been made to decode the 2 remaining ciphertexts and to locate the treasure, but all efforts have resulted in failure. There are many compelling arguments that the entire story is a hoax, including a 1980 article, A Dissenting Opinion by cryptographer Jim Gilligley, and in 1982 Joe Nickell published a scholarly analysis of the papers and their related story, using historical records that cast doubt on the existence of Thomas J. Beale. Nickell also presents linguistic evidence demonstrating that the documents could not have been written at the time alleged. Words such as stampeding, for instance, are of later vintage. His analysis of the writing style showed that Beale was almost certainly James B. Ward, whose 1885 pamphlet brought the Beale Papers to light. Nickell argues that the tale is thus a work of fiction, specifically, a secret vault allegory of the Freemasons. James B. Ward was, in fact, a Mason himself. The treasure was said to have been obtained by an American man named Thomas J. Beale in the early 1800s, from a mine to the north of Santa Fe, at that time part of a Spanish province, in an area that today would most likely be part of Colorado. According to the pamphlet, Beale was the chosen leader of a group of 30 gentlemen adventurers from Virginia, who stumbled upon the rich mine of gold and silver while hunting buffalo. They spent 18 months mining thousands of pounds of precious metals, which they then charged Beale with transporting back home to Virginia and burying in a secure location. Beale made multiple trips to stalk the hiding place, and then encrypted 3 messages with the location of the treasure, a description of it, and the names of the owners and their relatives. Beale placed the ciphertexts and some other papers in an iron box, which he gave in 1822 to a reliable person, the Lynchburg innkeeper Robert Morris. The treasure was supposed to be buried near Montvale in Bedford County, Virginia. Beale asked Morris not to open the box unless Beale or one of his men failed to return from their journey within 10 years. Sending a letter from St. Louis a few months later, Beale promised Morris that a friend in St. Louis would mail the key to the cryptograms, but it never arrived. 23 years later, in 1845, Morris opened the box, finding 2 plain text letters from Beale, and several pages of ciphertext separated into papers 1, 2, and 3. Morris had no luck in solving the ciphers, and decades later left the box and its contents to an unnamed friend. Using an edition of the United States Declaration of Independence as the key for a modified book cipher, the story tells how the friend successfully deciphered the second ciphertext, which gave a description of the buried treasure. Unable to solve the other 2 ciphertexts, the friend ultimately made the letters and ciphertexts public, in a pamphlet entitled The Beale Papers, published by another friend, James B. Ward, in 1885. Ward is thus not the friend. Ward himself is almost untraceable in local records except that a man with that name owned the home in which a Sarah Morris, identified as the consort of Robert Morris, died in at 77, Lynchburg, Virginia newspaper, May 21, 1865. He also is recorded as becoming a master mason in 1863. The deciphered message, the plain text of paper number 2 reads: I have deposited in the county of Bedford, about 4 miles from Beaufords, in an excavation or vault, 6 feet below the surface of the ground, the following articles, belonging jointly to the parties whose names are given in number 3, herewith. The first deposit consisted of 1,014 pounds of gold, and 3,812 pounds of silver, deposited November 1819. The second was made December 1821, and consisted of 1,907 pounds of gold, and 1,288 of silver, also jewels, obtained in St. Louis in exchange for silver to save transportation, and valued at $13,000. The above is securely packed in iron pots, with iron covers. The vault is roughly lined with stone, and the vessels rest on solid stone, and are covered with others. Paper number 1 describes the exact locality of the vault, so that no difficulty will be had in finding it. The second cipher can be decrypted fairly easily using any copy of the United States Declaration of Independence, but some editing for spelling is necessary. To decrypt it, one finds the word corresponding to the number. For example, the first number is 115, and the 115th word in the Declaration of Independence is instituted, and takes the first letter of that word. In the case of the example, I. Beale used a version of United States Declaration of Independence different from the original. To extract the hidden message, the following 5 modifications must be applied to the original DOI text. After word 154, institute, and before word 157, laying, 1 word must be added, probably A. After word 240, invariably, and before word 246, design, 1 word must be removed. After word 467, houses, and before word 495, B, 10 words must be removed. After word 630, eat, and before word 654, 2, 1 word must be removed. After word 677, foreign, and before word 819, valuable, 1 word must be removed. Did Thomas J. Beale exist? A survey of U.S. Census records in 1810 shows 2 persons named Thomas Beale, in Connecticut and New Hampshire. However, the population schedules from the 1810 U.S. Census are completely missing for 7 states, 1 territory, the District of Columbia, and 18 of the counties of Virginia. The 1820 U.S. Census has 2 persons named Thomas Beale, in Louisiana and Tennessee, and a Thomas K. Beale in Virginia, but the population schedules are completely missing for 3 states and 1 territory. Before 1850 the U.S. Census recorded the names of only the heads of households, others in the household were only counted. Beale, if he existed, may have been living in someone else's household. In addition, a man named Thomas Beale appears in the customer lists of St. Louis Post Department in 1820. According to the pamphlet, Beale sent a letter from St. Louis in 1822. Additionally, a Cheyenne legend exists about gold and silver being taken from the west and buried in mountains in the east, dating from roughly 1820. There has been considerable debate over whether the remaining two cipher texts are real or hoaxes. An early researcher, Carl Hammer of Sperry Univac, used supercomputers of the late 1960s to analyze the ciphers and found that while the ciphers were poorly encoded, the two undeciphered ones did not show the patterns one would expect of randomly chosen numbers and probably encoded an intelligible text. Other questions remain about the authenticity of the pamphlet's account. In 1934, Dr. Clarence Williams, a researcher at the Library of Congress, said, "To me, the pamphlet story has all the earmarks of a fake. There was no evidence save the word of the unknown author of the pamphlet that he ever had the papers."